All right, quadratic formula. To solve the quadratic equation, ax squared plus bx plus c equals 0. Use the quadratic formula. And here's what the quadratic formula is. It says that x is equal to the opposite of b plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4ac and you take all of that and you divide it by 2 times a. Okay? Now, a couple things that are real important. When you decide to label or choose your A, B, and C value, the equation has to be in this form. All right? The equation has to be in this form. ax squared plus bx plus c equals 0. And here's what I mean. If you were to get a problem that looked like x squared plus 10x equals negative 25, all right, you got to add 25 to both sides first. So your x squared plus 10x plus 25 is now equal to 0. And whatever's in front of the x squared is your a value. Whatever's in front of the x is your b value. And whatever's to the right of your x is your c value. So make sure that you put it in standard form before you label or before you start substituting into the quadratic formula. If you get something like 3x squared is equal to 2 times 2x plus 1. All right, this would be a case where you have to do the distributive property first on this right-hand side. So you would have 3x squared equals 4x plus 2 times 1 is 2. And then you would have to subtract 4x and subtract 2 from each side. And you would get 3x squared minus 4x minus 2 is equal to 0. And now you can label your A, B, and C values. So make sure you have everything on the left-hand side of the equation and it's in standard form of, you know, x squared, x, and then your constant before you label your values. Okay? So let's do one of these problems using the quadratic formula to solve for x. And we've got a 2x squared minus x is equal to 4. So if you take this equation and you subtract 4 from each side right away, then 2x squared minus x minus 4 is equal to 0. So now, the next thing that I would recommend you do is to label your values, all right? Your A is equal to 2. Your B, in this case, is equal to -1. And your C is equal to negative 4. And then you can start substituting. So x is equal to the opposite of b. All right, if your b is negative 1, the opposite of b would be positive 1. Plus or minus the square root. This is where tons of mistakes are made, is under this radical. All right, it's the square root of b squared. So negative 1 is your b, and here it is squared, minus 4. And I would write that every time that you have to do this quadratic formula manually. There's my b squared minus 4. And then I always put a in parentheses, and I put c in parentheses. And then we take all of that, and we divide it by 2 times our a value, which is 2. So now, I don't know how many of you use calculators or if you use your phones, but if you use a calculator, I think you can type in everything over here just the way that it is, even putting the parentheses. All right? So this x is going to be equal to 1 plus or minus the square root of. All right, so negative 1 squared is 1, minus 4 times a times c. 4 times a is 8, times negative 4 is negative 32. And that's where a lot of mistakes are made, because it's b squared minus 4 times a times c. And a lot of times this negative, if a times c is negative, for some reason people just forget to write it, because this all changes now, doesn't it? This becomes 1 plus 32. And it's all divided by 2 times 2, which is 4. All right, so x is equal to 1 plus or minus the square root of 33 over 4. All right, and since this radical is in simplest radical form right now, you can just leave it as the square root of 33. And your two solutions would be 1 plus radical 33 over 4 and 1 minus radical 33 over 4. All right, let's do one more. X squared plus 4x minus 4. I'm sorry, x squared plus 4x equals negative 4. So add 4 to each side first. X squared plus 4x plus 4 is equal to 0. Label your A, your B, and your C. So the A value is what's in front of the x squared, that's a 1. B value is in front of the x, so that's a 4. And your C value is to the right of the x, and that's a 4 as well. So your x is equal to the opposite of b, so we get negative 4, plus or minus b squared minus 4 times a times c. all divided by 2 times a. So our x is equal to -4 plus or minus square root of 4 squared is 16 minus 4 times 1 is 4 times 4 is another 16. And that's all divided by 2. So this square root of 16 minus 16, that's the square root of 0. So this whole thing goes away right here. All right, so your solutions are x is equal to -4 over 2, which is -2. Just one solution there. All right, and then in the second part of your assignment today, you're going to be using what's called the discriminant. And the discriminant of a quadratic is the value of b squared minus 4ac. All right, the discriminant of a quadratic is the value of b squared minus 4ac. Now, what that discriminant does, all right, is it tells you how many solutions there are for the quadratic. So look, we're going to say value of the discriminant. We're going to do a little table here. Value of discriminant and then next to that is number of solutions. And then we're going to draw a little picture of the graph of each. All right, so the first case is when b squared minus 4ac, when b squared minus 4ac is greater than 0. All right, there's going to be 2 real solutions. Two real solutions. What that means too small. What that means is if you graph the parabola or the quadratic, the graph would either look something like this, or something like this. But there would be 2 distinct places where the graph would hit the x-axis. Now, if the value of your discriminant, if your b squared minus 4ac is equal to 0, then you have one real solution. And that means if you graph the parabola, it would now look more like this. The vertex would be on the x-axis, or this. That's the case where your discriminant is equal to 0. The bottom of the graph will be on the x-axis, or the top of the graph will be on the x-axis. If your discriminant is greater than 0, then your graph will go through the x-axis 2 different times. All right, and the third case is when your b squared minus 4ac is less than 0. If your discriminant is less than 0, you have what's called no real solutions. No real solutions. So there's no x-intercepts. So the graph of the parabola would either look something like this, or it would look like this. It's just not going to hit the x-axis. So in the first part of your assignment today, you're going to be given quadratic equations. You're going to be asked to use the quadratic formula to solve. In the second part of your assignment, you're going to be asked to use the discriminant. We're going to use the discriminant. To determine the number of real solutions. So if you're given a quadratic, negative 2x squared minus 3x plus 5 equal to 0. All right, you're going to evaluate your b squared minus 4ac. So again, you're going to identify your a, your b, and your c. So in this case, your a is equal to negative 2. Your b is equal to negative 3. And your c is equal to 5. So our discriminant is b squared minus 4ac. So let's see, if we take b, which is negative 3, squared, minus 4 times a, which is negative 2, times c, which is 5. We get negative 3 squared, which is 9, minus 4 times negative 2. That's negative 8, times 5 is negative 40. So we're subtracting a negative, we're going to add. So our discriminant in this case is equal to 49. So our discriminant now, right, is greater than 0. Our b squared minus 4ac is greater than 0. So we have two real solutions. All right, so for this problem, they asked us to use the discriminant to determine the number of real solutions. Well, we have two real solutions. If you glance back up at the problem we did a few minutes ago, right here, this is your discriminant, agreed? This is your b squared minus your 4ac. Yeah, there it is. B squared minus 4ac, that's what your value under the radical is. We came over here, our b squared minus 4ac was 16 minus 16. In that problem, all right, our discriminant was equal to 0, wasn't it? So when the discriminant is equal to 0, right here, we just talked about it, when the discriminant is equal to 0, we had one solution. And back up here, when we did this problem, there's our one solution. Okay? And the problem before that, first problem we did today, here's our discriminant. Our discriminant was this 33. 33 is greater than 0, isn't it? And this problem had two real solutions. 1 plus the square root of 33 over 4, and 1 minus the square root of 33 over 4. All right, so in your assignment today, you're going to be using the quadratic formula to solve. And then in the second part of the assignment, you are going to be evaluating the discriminant to determine the number of solutions. So you guys that are in class, your assignment's going to be, I got another handout for you. It's page 245. We'll do 14 through 19. And then 25 through 30. And we always want to be sure that we check focus for homework. All right, so for you guys that are at home right now, I'm going to